China's train stations closing, Beijing's passenger flow collapsing, Great Depression incoming.
It's all covered in today's China Truths.
No business. Guangzhou South Station had no business on Saturday. I queued for more than 2 hours but got no customers. I couldn't get any passengers. It was so quiet, so miserable. Business was very bad. This used to be the largest bus station in Asia, Shanghai long-distance bus terminal. Now it feels increasingly deserted. Even the cattle here are unemployed. How long has it been since you last drove a long-distance bus? And how long has it been since you last went to a bus station? This is Dongguan's largest bus station, Nanqing Bus Station. There was no one there on May Day. A few years ago, this bus station was packed during the holidays. Where did all those people go? In recent years, with the economic downturn in China's big cities, many passenger stations across the country have struggled to operate or have even shut down. The largest passenger station in Wuhan closed less than 3 years after it was built. Beijing planned to keep only 2 of its 10 passenger stations, while Guangzhou reduced its number by more than 10 in a year. Even the passenger stations that survived saw few passengers on weekdays. Due to poor business, some bus drivers went unpaid for months. Analysts believe that the large-scale decline of passenger stations is not only due to changes in travel habits, but also reflects China's sluggish economy and declining population. Let's discuss these related topics today. China's passenger stations are now deserted, but they were thriving just a few years ago. These stations mainly served short and medium-distance travel. Before 2000, whether for work or business, people generally took buses. Waves of young people boarded buses from their hometowns to Guangzhou for work. However, after peaking in 2012, passenger volume has declined year after year. One netizen said, "The days of people squeezing together and fighting for seats are gone forever." Another netizen commented, "The bus station in our city has shrunk to just 1/5 of its original size. I'm not kidding. There's only a small door left. It's not even as good as a county-level bus station. It survived the pandemic for 3 years, but it didn't make it through 2024. The bus station in front of you is Dongguan Dalang Bus Station. People who used to work in Dongguan had to come here to take a bus. Dalang Station was built in 2008. Back then, it was crowded every day and had the highest passenger traffic in Dongguan. But now, with changing times, fewer and fewer people take the bus, leaving behind only an empty parking lot and a deserted waiting hall. Most bus stations in Guangdong are on the verge of closing. This is the Guangdong Provincial Bus Station, once the largest, with the most buses, the widest routes, and a history of over 30 years. Now it cannot escape the fate of decline. Its passenger flow once ranked first in Guangzhou. It carried the dreams and return journeys of countless people. It was the first stop for countless migrant workers heading south to Guangdong, a lifelong memory for many college students traveling to school, and the long-distance bus that took countless workers home for the holidays. At its peak, there was an average of more than 2,000 departures per day, carrying over 100,000 passengers daily. But now, only a few people remain, and the lobby on the first floor has been closed. How long will it take for the entire bus station to shut down? Some netizens analyzed the reasons for the decline in the passenger bus business, believing it was due to fewer job opportunities and reduced labor mobility. In the past, there were many job openings in the Pearl River Delta and the Yangtze River Delta, which fueled long-distance passenger transportation. While the increase in private cars played a role, it wasn't the main factor. Analysts argue that China is far from reaching the level where everyone owns a car, and ordinary people still rely on buses for travel. The fact that fewer people are taking buses now reflects the severity of China's economic downturn. Many people can't find jobs and are staying home. Some are cutting expenses so much that they avoid traveling altogether. This blogger Ashu works hard in Shenzhen. He said he doesn't own a private car and finds taking the bus more convenient than driving. Many people laugh at me. I'm almost 40 years old, yet I still don't have a car. I really don't know how to respond. If I go out, a round-trip bus fare is only 10 yuan. I have a friend who drives a BMW. He spends 10 yuan on tolls, 20 yuan on gas, and another 20 yuan on parking. That's 40 to 50 yuan per trip, 4 or 5 times what I pay. Plus, he has to spend extra time finding a parking spot. So I still think public transportation is the more comfortable and convenient choice. I can't call them because I'm afraid they'll ask how my job search is going. A few days ago, I suddenly mustered the courage to call my parents. Since I'm currently unemployed and staying at home, they find it hard to accept this situation. Another reason is that I spent an entire year traveling last year, relying on my previous savings for budget travel. When I arrived in Hangzhou this year, I didn't expect the job market to be so bad, making it extremely difficult to find a satisfactory job. Now, without stable income, things are different from a few years ago when I was in e-commerce, earning a considerable income, and also running a profitable side business in social media. Over the past 2 years, my income has nearly dried up, creating a stark contrast with my previous earnings. The heavy pressures are all piling up at once, making us feel like we don't belong in this city. Is selling our home and returning to the countryside the only way to survive? Where do we go from here? I'm leaving Shanghai. I came here after losing my job in Suzhou, thinking that since Shanghai is close, moving to a bigger city would bring more opportunities. I packed up all my belongings and relocated. But in the end, I couldn't find a job, and I still had to pay rent every month. Shanghai is a prosperous city, but its prosperity has nothing to do with me. I didn't dare to stop even for a moment. From the moment I woke up, I kept submitting resumes, only to face repeated rejection. I started feeling lost and cried for no reason, as if my mood was spiraling downward. I knew I couldn't go on like this, so I decided to leave the big city and go back home, a place I had once longed to escape. Is this the end? No. Maybe it's a new beginning. I'm unemployed. Let me tell you what really happened. I was working yesterday. Today was my 4th day at the factory, but just now, the foreman told me that I was too slow and couldn't meet the production targets, so he fired me. It's raining outside. Will there be work tomorrow? No wonder people say, if you want to be deceived, go to Suzhou. If you're exhausted and want to cry, go to Jiangsu, China. I'm 33 years old and have been unemployed for 3 years. I hide in my rental apartment, just eating and waiting for life to pass. After reading this, you'll probably feel less anxious about your own situation. Every day, I stay in my rental unit, staying up all night, sleeping in until the afternoon, and even then, I don't get out of bed immediately. I just play games until I'm too hungry to continue. Then I get up to find food. I can't even afford to buy vegetables, so I survive on steamed buns. They're much cheaper than eating out. Last year, I could still afford pricier takeout, but at the beginning of this year, I had to switch to Pin Hao Fan, a budget meal option. Now I can't even afford that. My life is truly worse than a cow's. Every day, the thing I fear most is my phone ringing, because I have no one to call except my family. I've been hiding my unemployment from them, vaguely telling them I'm doing fine whenever they ask. I don't know how much longer I can keep up this lie, and I don't even want to think about the day it gets exposed. I feel completely numb, as if I'm walking on flesh. People my age are already married, have kids, and have successful careers, while I remain stuck in the same place. I don't know what I should do, nor do I see a clear future ahead. Across China, most bus stations and public transportation services are operating at a loss, forcing some automotive companies to take drastic measures just to survive. In Sanyuan County, Xianyang City, Shanxi Province, the occupancy rate at the passenger station has dropped to just 10%. The manager of Fengyuan Automobile Company said, "Business is really bad. In the past, our station had long queues during holidays, but now, there's barely anyone."
Finally, I am done with my work. I am posting this video today not to win anyone's sympathy, but because I can't hold it in any longer. My company failed, and I have too many disappointments in my life. Now I am in debt for 1.9 million. I dare not tell anyone, not even my parents, because they are old. I am afraid they will be sad and unable to bear it. Since I am not young anymore, I am already 40 years old. China's real estate crisis and economic downturn, coupled with the CCP's crackdown on private and foreign companies, have led to high unemployment, weak domestic demand, and the middle class returning to poverty. A survey shows that 80% of Chinese consumers believe they have experienced consumption downgrade. The phenomenon of consumption downgrade in first-tier cities is shocking. Whether in Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, or Shenzhen, the former consumption boom has now subsided. Instead, people are tightening their belts and holding their wallets tightly, and many young people have begun to save money. Everyone has reduced consumption, and the once bustling shopping malls have now become deserted. Today, we will talk about the topic of Chinese people's consumption downgrade. In the first half of last year, the total retail sales of social consumer goods in first-tier cities declined across the board. Shenzhen fell by 2.5%, Beijing by 6.3%, and Shanghai and Guangzhou were even worse, with drops of nearly 10%. Don't underestimate these numbers. Behind them, countless restaurant and retail owners are suffering, which means that the purchasing power of Chinese consumers has collapsed. We can see the extent of the local middle-class consumption downgrade from what happened recently in Shanghai. First, the middle class used to frequent the fitness chain Wells, but Wells encountered a business crisis last year, and a wave of closures broke out at the end of last year. Wells primarily targeted the middle and upper classes in Shanghai, with the middle class making up most of its customers. Over the past 2 years, the economy has been bad, and fewer people have taken private lessons. The biggest profit source disappeared, and Wells couldn't even pay the rent. Secondly, some high-end postpartum care centers in Shanghai have also begun to close. Why can't these centers stay afloat? Ordinary people can't afford them, and the middle class, who used to be the main consumers, no longer go. There are also fewer students in Shanghai's international schools than before. In the past, middle-class families wanted their children to receive a better education and climb the social ladder, so they preferred sending them to international schools. But since last year, many middle-class families have transferred their children to public schools because their incomes have dropped, and the expensive tuition has become too much of a burden. Beijing's middle class, who have cars and houses and earn 1 million yuan a year, used to have no worries about food and drink, so why has their consumption level declined? The first and biggest reason is that Beijing's housing prices have dropped. A property originally worth 10 million yuan has now decreased to 7.5 million yuan, a direct loss of 2.5 million yuan. If you have to pay tens of thousands of yuan in mortgage loans every month, how can you dare to spend? In addition, Beijing's economy is struggling. Many large companies are cutting salaries and laying off employees. Many small businesses are also facing difficulties, especially in traditional industries like catering, where competition is fierce. We went to eat at a New World restaurant 2 days ago. It was a large restaurant of about 100 to 200 square meters. Yet, at 12 noon, there were not many customers. How could it not be losing money? No one is making money now, so how can they afford to spend? Let me tell you about an outrageous situation in Shanghai. The middle class in Shanghai no longer get married or have children. They own 3 houses in Shanghai, 1 in Sanya, and 2 abroad. To what extent has their consumption been downgraded now? As the Chinese mainland economy continues to decline, the unemployment rate is rising, especially among young people. The pressure of life is increasing, and many young people are starting to save money to cope with an uncertain future. On the Chinese mainland social platform Xiaohongshu, many young people share their experiences of saving on shopping expenses. Some internet celebrities share tips on how to spend less. There have been more than 1.5 million posts on how to save money, with a total of 130 million views. Young people must learn to downgrade consumption. I used to have a monthly salary of 20,000 yuan, live a so-called refined life, drink a cup of coffee for 30 to 40 yuan a day, and go to restaurants and bars for entertainment and shopping from time to time. Moonlight Tribe and pre-consumption were synonymous with my previous life. I pursued temporary happiness and fell into the trap of consumerism. When I learned to downgrade consumption, I realized that 1 cup of coffee could buy 2 tails of pork ribs, and 100 yuan could buy so many snacks in the supermarket, enough for me to eat for a week. I didn't like shopping in supermarkets before. I thought it was too troublesome. It was more convenient to buy online and have items delivered to my door. But now I know that supermarket discount promotions are more cost-effective than the full discounts on some apps. Here, you can get a Coke for 1 yuan, snacks for 1 yuan, and daily necessities for 1 yuan. In fact, downgrading consumption does not mean not consuming at all, but rather cutting out unnecessary expenses, ensuring quality of life while making more cost-effective choices. China's stock market fluctuates, young people are stuck with loans for stock trading, and the market is wailing. Recently, China's stock market fluctuated and fell, leaving many young people stuck with loans for stock trading, and the market was wailing. The industry warned that investors should be prepared for a crash. Please see the report. Chinese people. Who would have thought that it was a bull market a day ago? I was up 90,000 yesterday and lost 140,000 today, including principal and interest. The sharp drop in the stock market dispelled the recent optimism of retail investors. The market was wailing, and stockholders lamented the difficulty of escaping the trap. Chinese young stockholders. Now I don't want to be rich, I just want to get out of the trap and get my money back. Why is it so difficult? What kind of market is this? It's really a one-way trip. At the end of September last year, after the Chinese Communist Party authorities launched so-called policies covering monetary easing, fiscal, and stock market stimulus, the stock market soared, and many young investors rushed in, with some even borrowing money to trade stocks. Stock investment manager Zheng Shuguang. For retail investors, especially newcomers, in their minds, a bull market may mean a straight or diagonal rise, but in fact it fluctuates repeatedly. Since the A-share market rose at the end of September last year, more than 100 companies have announced plans to reduce their holdings, and the main funds in the Shanghai and Shenzhen stock markets have also taken the opportunity to flee. Analysts believe that the current policy of the Communist Party of China is primarily to stimulate the stock market through monetary easing and supply restrictions, without fundamentally improving corporate or economic fundamentals. Retail investors should be very cautious when entering the market. Zheng Shuguang. I think for these new and old stock investors who do not understand companies, cannot read financial statements, are unwilling to study companies, and lack a good mentality, they should resolutely prevent themselves from entering the market. Nomura Securities recently issued a warning that after the stock market frenzy, a crash will follow. The current situation of the Chinese stock market is similar to that of the stock market in 2015. Investors should be prepared for a crash. Zheng Shuguang. As for this wave, in principle, it can basically be imagined that it is driven by monetary and fiscal stimulus, relying on the existing economic scale under these stimuli. The long-term prospects are very difficult, and new investors are like scapegoats for securities companies to withdraw capital from the market. Many people are being lured in and will lose money very quickly. This is also the trap that the CCP is setting for its own people to collect one last haul.
Chinese yuan crash in 2025? A surge in capital flight expected. As the year draws to a close, the recently concluded Central Economic Work Conference of the CCP unveiled policies for active fiscal measures and moderately relaxed monetary policies. However, China's economy remains in a precarious state. The latest data reveals that in November, capital outflows, also known as capital flight, from China reached a record-breaking $45.7 billion. Zhai Xianying, the former president of the investment banking division at China Construction Bank, predicts that the Chinese yuan will experience a substantial devaluation in 2025, signaling a peak in capital flight. Li Jun, an independent TV producer, said that according to official CCP data, November 2024 saw a historic outflow of capital from China's capital markets, totaling $45.7 billion. Data from the State Administration of Foreign Exchange, SAFE, shows that in November, cross-border investment income amounted to $188.9 billion, while outflows totaled $234.6 billion, resulting in a deficit of $45.7 billion, the largest monthly deficit in history. Li Jun noted that for the past 2 to 3 decades, this figure has traditionally been positive, reflecting a surplus. Even in early 2022, when China's economy was still struggling due to the pandemic, there was a surplus of $100 billion, suggesting that foreign capital continued to invest in China. However, by the end of 2022, this surplus sharply plummeted to around $20 billion, and in the second quarter of 2023, it became a negative value of more than $10 billion for the first time in 2 to 3 decades. Despite a brief rebound, October 2024 saw a deficit of $25.8 billion, and November further expanded this to $45.7 billion. This marks a significant turning point in the history of China's capital flows situation. Zhai Shanning, former head of China Construction Bank's investment banking division, suggested that capital flight is still in its early stages, with the real wave of outflows expected in 2025. According to Zhai, the recent outflows are merely the beginning of a larger trend, as more cautious investors begin to move capital out of China in anticipation of greater instability. He forecasts a peak of capital flight in 2025 and notes that by 2026, the external environment may not be conducive to such movements. He explained that during the months following October, there should be rapid foreign exchange growth due to the forced settlements of foreign exchange for export enterprises. If this were the case, the Chinese yuan should be relatively stable, but the current trend is already alarming. Zhai warned that once the forced settlement period ends, the outflows will likely intensify. He also predicted that the Chinese yuan will undergo a massive devaluation in the near future, potentially far beyond what is currently imaginable. He explained that with a population of about 1 billion, out of the total 1.4 billion, if just 100 million people each took advantage of the government's annual foreign exchange quota of $10,000, that would result in a total of $1 trillion being moved out of the country. Zhai emphasized that the real capital flight has yet to fully materialize because Chinese citizens are generally slow to react and often act only after rumors and information spread widely. Zhai further explained that the capital flight in recent months is only partially visible. He revealed that in the fourth quarter of this year, much larger amounts of capital have been moved out of China via decentralized cryptocurrency exchanges such as Binance, where Chinese citizens have been converting their yuan into USDT, a type of stablecoin. The Chinese government does not provide citizens with easy channels to exchange yuan for dollars, which has pushed people to seek alternative methods. Senior media figure Guo Jun commented on a significant symbolic event that occurred the previous week. The 30-year Chinese government bond yield dropped below that of Japan's 30-year bonds for the first time in history, a clear indicator of deteriorating confidence in China's economic future. In comparison, the U.S. 30-year bond yield is 4.755%, while European countries such as Germany, 2.534%, and France, 3.64%, offer higher yields than China and Japan. Guo emphasized that this drop in the Chinese bond yield shows that China's 30-year bonds now offer the lowest returns among all major global economies, while the risk associated with these bonds is exceptionally high. Foreign capital invested in China, estimated at around $2.5 trillion, is increasingly likely to leave, as investing in U.S. bonds offers almost double the return with significantly lower risk. Guo stated that the Chinese yuan is bound to continue its depreciation. Exchange rates are essentially determined by supply and demand, and the government's control over these factors can only maintain the currency's value within a limited range. With China still claiming large foreign exchange reserves, the government can control the currency to some extent, but the pressure on the Chinese yuan will intensify if China's economic downturn continues and foreign capital exits in greater volumes. He also pointed out the potential for the incoming U.S. President, Donald Trump, to escalate the trade war with China, possibly imposing more tariffs, which could lead China to devalue the yuan further as a way to offset the impact of the tariffs. Zhai Shanning also discussed a common misconception about China's foreign exchange reserves. Many people believe that the Chinese government holds vast reserves, but Zhai clarified that this is a misleading impression. The reserves often cited by the government do not reflect the full picture, as a significant portion of the reserves consists of liabilities. As of 2023, China's foreign exchange reserves totaled $3.2 trillion, but the country's external liabilities amounted to approximately $2.45 trillion. This leaves a net value of only around $700 billion. Furthermore, the reserves are not entirely in US dollars. They include other currencies such as the Russian ruble, Vietnamese dong, Malaysian ringgit, Thai baht, and offshore yuan, which are counted as part of China's foreign exchange reserves. In reality, China's reserves in US dollars are significantly lower than the official figure suggests. Xi noted that much of the foreign exchange reserves come from businesses and individuals engaging in foreign trade or exchanging currencies. These reserves are not the Chinese government's money but represent the transactions of international businesses operating in China. Xi also stressed that China's economy no longer has a core industry driving growth. As seen in the most recent Central Economic Work Conference, China's economy lacks vital sectors that generate significant revenues. Instead, China is increasingly relying on borrowing to stay afloat. Xi noted that in past years, specific industries were highlighted as key drivers of economic growth, but this year, only vague mentions of the Hainan Free Trade Port and artificial intelligence, AI, were made. Xi highlighted that China's fiscal situation is precarious, with government revenue expected to be about 20 trillion yuan or $2.74 trillion, while expenditures will reach 40 trillion yuan or $5.48 trillion. A significant portion of the spending is on debt issuance, including local government bonds and national debts. This reliance on borrowing to cover expenditures indicates that China is essentially borrowing money to survive. In summary, Xi warned that China's economy no longer has the essential industries or revenue sources it once relied on. With industries like real estate and foreign trade rapidly declining, he questioned the future of China's currency, which has become increasingly decoupled from the country's economic reality. As China faces mounting economic challenges and increasing capital flight, the forecast for 2025 is bleak. Experts predict a significant devaluation of the Chinese yuan, further exacerbated by the mass exit of foreign capital. With China's foreign exchange reserves increasingly insufficient and its core industries faltering, the country may soon face an economic crisis of unprecedented scale.